Bitcoin continues to climb the mountain, getting ever so closer to the promised land of $100,000 a coin. But is it the promised land? Or is 100K just a false peak to a real summit that exists further than the eye can see? Will Bitcoin bounce off the ceiling of 100K? It could, but today I'm going to make the case for why it's also very possible that it explodes through the false ceiling of 100K and just keeps going, causing panic and FOMO, the likes of which we've never seen before. Many are completely unprepared for what comes next when extreme demand meets the immovable object of an absolute fixed supply. Bitcoin just keeps climbing higher and higher without any real corrections along the way. This is making many new investors understandably uncomfortable and weary that a big drop is imminent. And that may be true. Bitcoin's price action history, even during the short-lived max hype and mania phases, does tend to have several large 20 to 30% corrections along the way. And of course, this is entirely possible, as we begin this hype phase where massive demand is meeting a shrinking available supply. There's also the psychological effect of 100K Bitcoin. As you can see on this chart tracking sell orders on Coinbase, there are thick sell walls in the levels as they get closer to 100K, which is represented by the red lines on the right. Many never thought Bitcoin would ever reach these levels, even though Bitcoiners have been saying it for a very long time. Just remember, when the price was reaching $1,000 for the first time, Bitcoiners were already saying 100K was the next big summit. Just like today, as it nears the milestone of 100K, Bitcoiners are already talking about 1 million per coin being the next big summit. And again, they're being called crazy for it. What I think many people aren't fully grasping is the scale of the capital unlock we've seen with the ETFs and MicroStrategy, and the frenzy to buy what little Bitcoin is available at these prices. Meaning we could bounce off 100K and correct a bit, but we could just as likely break right through 100K and keep going. Market analysts like this one on CNBC this morning think the latter is more likely.
Let's start with Bitcoin because we were testing new highs today. We went well above the 97,000 mark. Give me a sense of what the charts tell you about Bitcoin.
Good morning, Contessa. In terms of the charts on Bitcoin, the chart has been one that had been consolidating for almost 6 months, Contessa, and it has now started to break out to the upside. So from a technical perspective, that is a bullish sign. And when we look at Bitcoin itself and you sort of do a measured objective technically, we can see a move as high as about $133,000.
So as he said, the 7-month price consolidation we saw leading up to this massive move was extremely telling for what could be coming. As the price continues to gap up at the rate it has been over the last couple weeks, demand from an institutional investor level has been increasing. The ETFs and MicroStrategy flow data is a perfect example of what's happening here. We are first seeing institutional FOMO, which will inevitably lead to mass retail FOMO, which is historically when Bitcoin starts to approach a cycle top. So we could see the price break through 100K and gap up very quickly to 120 or 130K, which could then increase institutional FOMO and spark retail to start chasing the price up. And that's when we can start to see face-melting moves up that usually characterize cycle tops. But what about the giant elephant in the room of nation-state FOMO? As we've talked about a lot over the last few weeks, the US government under a Trump presidency is eyeing the potential of buying 1 million Bitcoin over the next 5 years. Senator Cynthia Lummis, who's responsible for putting forth a proposal for a US strategic Bitcoin reserve, was on CNBC this morning talking about how the plan could be implemented without even printing any new money.
The proposal that I have and that President Trump has discussed about a strategic Bitcoin reserve or strategic Bitcoin stockpile where the United States would acquire and hold Bitcoin for 20 years. Because of the way that Bitcoin has been appreciating since inception, this would be an asset that could help shore up the US dollar as the world reserve currency and serve as a reserve that could be used to reduce the national debt significantly. You know, the American people are still hurting from inflation, from high prices, and they want the national debt reduced. These are ways to do it with an asset that is immutable, can easily be held by the federal government in a variety of vaults, and that states can participate in as well. So this is the gold standard digital asset, and a strategic Bitcoin reserve is the way to embed it.
You know, we got off the gold standard a long time ago. My question is how much you would spend tax dollars at a time when we're talking about trying to reduce costs. How much would you spend on Bitcoin as part of this reserve?
We wouldn't have to spend any new dollars. We have reserves at our 12 Federal Reserve banks, including gold certificates that could be converted to current fair market value. They're held at their 1970s value on the books, and then sell them into Bitcoin. That way, we wouldn't have to use any new dollars in order to establish this reserve. The United States already holds over 200,000 Bitcoin in the asset forfeiture funds. So that would be the initial source of Bitcoin. So no new money spent on this reserve.
Many inside the Trump cabinet see the very real possibility of this happening in the first few months of Trump's presidency. And as original Bitcoin developer Adam Back said in a post on X, a U.S. strategic reserve is when we see Bitcoin go from 6 figures to 7 in the blink of an eye. Michael Saylor was on PBD podcast on Monday, and he laid out why the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is almost a no-brainer from a U.S. prosperity perspective.
Senator Cynthia Lummis, has put forth the proposal that the United States establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's a brilliant idea that she's presented to the Senate. The geopolitical logic here is simple. It's go where all the money is going to go and buy it first. And so if you knew that everybody was going to move to Manhattan and you could buy 20% of Manhattan in 1650, it would be a good idea. But maybe more to the point, the British came to the New World and they grabbed the New World, and that's what created the British Empire. So the United States runs the world's reserve currency, but Bitcoin is emerging as the world's reserve capital network if you just want to keep your money forever. And everybody in the world loves that idea. I'd like to just keep my money forever. So the smartest thing for the U.S. to do is to buy up as much of that as they can. So you buy 1 million coin, that's 5% of the network. Buy 4 million coin, you got 20% of the network. Why not buy 20, 25, 30% of the network? If you buy the network, you can buy it for money which is effectively free. In fact, you could just sell the gold, swap it to Bitcoin, and then as Bitcoin becomes a 200, 300, 400 trillion dollar asset, right, you're sitting on anywhere from 40 to 80 trillion dollar gain. And so the logic of this is pretty clear. First of all the foreign capital in the world is going to be drawn into the Bitcoin network. So if the United States owns it, then that's like the same as the money coming to the U.S. You're just drawing capital from Russia, from China, from Africa, from South America. It's going to come to the U.S. on the Bitcoin network if the U.S. owns it. The second logic is all the capital from the 20th century is stampeding into the 21st century. So all the money that was invested in crappy bonds and decaying real estate and warehouses falling down and companies that are going out of business, all that money is going to go into the Bitcoin network. So you own the 21st century. And, the third idea here is right now, a lot of people use U.S. sovereign debt as their capital asset, which, as I just pointed out, is minus 5%. Every business person knows it's not as good as the S&P index. So if people start to swap out the treasury bonds and they start to buy Bitcoin with it, then you would want to own the Bitcoin, because that way you don't have to worry about people replacing the U.S. treasury asset with a Bitcoin asset, because the U.S. owns Bitcoin too. So this defends the U.S. reserve currency status. It defends U.S. economic leadership. It attracts capital from our enemies. It attracts foreign capital, and it actually lays in place a peaceful, equitable solution to working out our differences with everybody in the world that's a business person would appreciate.
So just as Saylor is making clear with how he has expertly positioned his company MicroStrategy, he makes a clear case why a country like the US, which is basically just a large governed corporate entity, could also adopt a similar strategy and see their dominance on the global economic stage preserved and strengthened for another 100 plus years into the future. Definitely seems like something a business-minded leader like Trump could come to see as an attractive plan. And this very real possibility is when we see FOMO levels and extreme price moves, the likes of which will send shockwaves around the world. So in saying all this, my message to you is to not necessarily expect Bitcoin to do what it has historically done and try to trade this thing with that expectation. Bitcoin demand is reaching such a massive scale that the gradually phase we've seen over the last 15 years could very well be transitioning to the suddenly phase, which means we're getting closer to escape velocity. And you definitely don't want to be caught in a trader's mindset when that phase shift happens. So don't be like the traders on Coinbase who have set up sell orders leading up to 100K. Remember, 100K may seem like the summit, but in reality, it's just another step along the way towards massive global demand coming up against the immovable object of Bitcoin's total fixed supply. So don't be a seller here. Don't let the institutions, banks, and nation states buy all the Bitcoin. Follow their lead and be a buyer through services like Swan. Visit swan.com or download the app by searching for Swan Bitcoin in the App Store. Swan has the fastest onboarding experience in the industry, as you can go from sign up to buying Bitcoin within minutes. Plus, you get your first $10,000 in Bitcoin purchases with zero fees. Visit swan.com to get started today. I'll leave you today with another fire post from Stack Hodler where he explains what's happening better than I can. What you're seeing with MicroStrategy is just the beginning. This is way bigger than just a massive MSTR pump. Saylor is making it brutally obvious that you either buy Bitcoin or you fall behind. And this could be the tumbling domino that leads to hyper-Bitcoinization. The idea is simple. Convert as much fiat capital into finite Bitcoin as possible. Use Bitcoin's performance to attract yield-starved investors. And do it as aggressively as possible. MicroStrategy doesn't have a monopoly on this strategy. Semler Scientific is another company working this strategy. They were up 27.9% yesterday, and they're up another 20% pre-market this morning. Expect more companies to follow. The beauty of this is that every company that does this is working on the same team, Team Bitcoin. Yes, they are all competing for finite Bitcoin, but the more competitors there are, the more their holdings collectively increase in value. This creates a massive incentive for more and more companies to join the winning team, Team Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is now the 93rd largest company in the US by market cap simply by following this strategy. As other companies start to shoot up the rankings thanks purely to their Bitcoin strategy, it will become clear that the only winning strategy is to join them. This is the harsh reality. Operate on the superior monetary standard or lose. It's your choice. And the sooner you make the right choice, the faster you prosper. This is true for corporations, individuals, countries, and anyone else with capital they need to protect. This is the revolution. When this idea reaches its tipping point and becomes broadly understood, Bitcoin will dramatically reprice to its true value as the only credibly finite bearer asset in the world. Millions per coin is coming. No one knows when, but MicroStrategy is now accelerating the timeline in a way that no one predicted. The wave of fiat capital that still needs to squeeze into the small portion of coins that are available for sale will result in a show unlike anything we've seen in financial markets. If you're holding Bitcoin, it's never been more important to understand what you own. I couldn't agree more. You owe it to yourself and your children and your grandchildren to do the work to understand what Bitcoin is on a deeper level. So do the work now, and I guarantee you will not regret it. That's it for today. Let me know what you think of $1 million Bitcoin in the comments below. Like this video, share it with your inner circle, and of course, subscribe to the channel for more high signal Bitcoin content. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's called Suddenly for a reason.